walk into a new organization, new office, new culture, and say that, no, but this is what I'm going to ask for and this is what I want to get done?
If your purpose is greater than yourself, you can demand. HP is a large company in India. We are a multi-billion-dollar business, which means that we have enormous scale and span, and we matter to the global business significantly. My first and foremost metric for success is to drive the business and make sure that we are delivering the business, and we're delivering the business better than the expectation. For a country that needs education, employability, skills, and is the workforce of the world today and the workforce of the world in the future.
Absolutely.
What else could you make that would be more valuable? What India is teaching us to do in terms of understanding the markets of the future, understanding young people, understanding emerging markets. 90 countries look like India. They don't look like the US or China. The business is doing well. Everyone's happy. If the business is not doing well, then it's difficult for the company as a whole. My most famous phrase my team will tell you is, can you repeat that to me as if I'm 10 years old?
That's brilliant. So that's leadership strategy 101 that we're learning from Ipsita right now. I'm going to make notes during this conversation. Today on the show, we have with us a leader who truly exemplifies what it means to lead with vision, scale, and purpose. Joining us, Ipsita Dasgupta. Ipsita is a Senior Vice President and Managing Director for HP across India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. Ipsita, so good to be sitting down to have a chat with you after all these years.
Thanks, Aabha. Same here. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
And fantastic to see you in your new role. You've always been leading the way when it comes to, driving influential companies, especially in the tech world and cross-continent. What's it like currently shaping HP's strategy when it comes to India, Bangladesh, growing markets, seeing outcomes come through? What's it really like in this role? How's it been for you?
Well, it's been lovely. And it's funny, you called it a new role. It just goes to show how long it's been since we've actually sat down together.
It has been a while.
I've almost been in the role for 2.5 years now. So I think it's been quite exciting. HP is a large company in India. We are a multi-billion-dollar business, which means that we have enormous scale and span, and we matter to the global business significantly. So that makes it makes it a different environment. If the business is doing well, everyone's happy. If the business is not doing well, then it's difficult for the company as a whole. We've also been the business that has kind of led the way on being innovative and entrepreneurial about trying new things, doing new things, being more customer-centric, and understanding the way growth markets are progressing. And so working in that environment and sort of driving the transformation we've been doing as a company has been really fun.
Has it been challenging in a sense? It must be incredibly high stakes, and you're navigating all these various nuances, cultures.
Yeah, it is. Of course, it's challenging. I know you well enough to know that you would agree with this fully. Nothing is fun doing unless it is challenging.
True.
But
I'm like high five on that. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But it's along with the exciting part. So I don't know if Aabha we've ever talked about this, but I love learning. So I have moved from industry to industry. I have gone from selling aircraft engines and gas turbines to Saas Bahu cereals and kabaddi to...
That was at Hot Star. I remember those days.
Star,
that's when we just met right after that.
Exactly. To being at Apple and now being at HP and starting off at IBM and in Cisco. So for me, what's most exciting is that first stage when you actually are looking at everything through a new set of eyes and learning about the industry. So you actually get to ask all the stupid questions.
True.
But with the stupid questions come a lot of reflection and a lot of thinking about what many people probably take for granted after being in industry for a long time. So I feel sometimes my superpower is being stupid at the beginning of a new opportunity.
But I just love what you said, both about learning as well as not being afraid to ask stupid questions, because I think this is something, and it's really important. for all leaders, and especially women leaders who are sometimes that extra self-conscious on whether or not they're sounding intelligent. I don't think there's anything wrong in asking stupid questions.
I think that's completely true. And actually, I think women are much more comfortable asking questions than men are. And I still remember, I won't say what company, but I remember starting a new job with two other people, walking in and us going through the onboarding together. And we were executives in the company many years ago. And we'd attend all these learning sessions together where different businesses would take us through the business. And the other two men would always be completing sentences or explaining what is being talked about with them. And I'd always be like, can you please explain that to me like I'm 12 years old? Can you please explain that to me like I'm 10 years old? And one of the interesting things our boss said to us at the time, and he was the MD, is that because I asked all of those questions early on, I had a much better understanding of the business. And both these other two guys were so self-conscious about coming across like they knew. So my most famous phrase my team will tell you is, can you repeat that to me as if I'm 10 years old?
That's brilliant. So that's leadership strategy 101 that we're learning from Ipsita right now. I'm going to make notes during this conversation. Now, talking about, you mentioned all the various organizations you've led, and some of these are incredibly large organizations. I mean, you said GE, IBM, Apple, HP. Is it a different set of skills that are required to navigate these complex organizations?
Yeah, I think it is, Aabha. I think, having said that, I've never been in a startup. And so, but I'll tell you what I think this requires, especially if you are in these companies. So I've spent a portion of my career in the States. Okay. And then I've spent more than half of my career outside of the US in emerging markets, looking after India, living in China, looking after the Middle East and Southeast Asia. And I think when you work the way I have for an American multinational or a Western multinational in other markets, you're never going to be the best sales or commercial person in the market, because I didn't grow up in India or in China or in Southeast Asia or the Middle East. So my ability to transact will never be as good as many of the people on my team. And you're also not the person who's sitting in headquarters, understanding everyone's mood and how people are thinking every single day. But I think what makes really powerful leaders in these positions are people who can represent the enormous opportunities of these markets back to headquarters where your funds and your resources come from. Fantastic. And demand a disproportionate amount of resources and energy. And I think that's where that sort of middle point is actually what I have spent much of my career doing, and I enjoy doing it.
You said demand, right? And I'm curious because, again, that's something that a lot of leaders struggle with. How do you do that? How do you compel authority? How do you build that in? How do you grow to that level where you can sort of walk into a new organization, new office, new culture and say that, no, but this is what I'm going to ask for and this is what I want to get done?
I think it's actually pretty simple in my head. If your purpose is greater than yourself, you can demand. I was quoted when I first joined HP within 3 months in an interview where I said, HP is good for India, but India is great for HP. And it was used as the title of the article. And from then it just caught speed, and multiple people have repeated it to me through the years. My teams have gone out and used it in multiple meetings with either government or industry. And what I meant by that is that, HP does a lot in India. We have highest market share. 1 out of every 2 computers that you'll see in the country is HP. 1 out of every 3 that are being bought every day is HP. But what India is teaching us to do in terms of understanding the markets of the future, understanding young people, understanding emerging markets. 90 countries look like India. They don't look like the US or China. Sets us up for the future, right? So if what you do is makes you demand for driving skilling, healthcare, education, employability in countries like these, as well as grow the business, you're not demanding for yourself. And so your right to do so grows. And I find that people always help people who are thinking about something that's bigger than themselves.
That's so well said. And I'm going to come back to that, the India of the future as well, in just a short time. But, you mentioned stakeholders, regulators, the ecosystem. Again, how complex is it to engage with these regulators, and how do you hold your own as a leader?
Yeah, it's a great question. At the end of the day, I think it's really important to understand people and to understand where a person is coming from. And I grew up in 6 countries, and I have lived in 3, and India, China, and the US. And I have covered, between 30 and 35 countries in sort of my, in different roles. So I'm used to thinking about where the other person or the other organization is coming from and what they're looking to move or do.
Okay.
So I think when that's the starting point, you have a lot of you have a lot of credibility, and people recognize it instantly. Having said that, I had to learn. I still remember the first few times I was going and meeting ministers and chief ministers. I had to learn, what's the protocol? What do you say? How do you address the person? How do you dress? Because India's different from the States, where I had spent most of my life before that. So it took me a while to figure some of the superficial details out, but the other stuff is actually more about mapping the person and mapping the organization they're with to understand what are they looking for, and how do you add value.
Okay. So when you've made these cross-industry shifts, how did you assess the role? How did you assess? I mean, some of the decisions you've made have actually led to a lot of new circumstances for you, like you said, from living in the US while your kids were still back in India, to a whole host of other changes that you would have had to deal with. So how did you assess these moves? Because today a lot of women are looking to make cross-industry moves or to grow horizontally. What all factors should they assess while doing so?
Yeah, look, I'm not sure that I assessed the roles.
Okay.
I followed people. So if I find somebody doing something that either inspires me or I feel like I can learn from, and combined with that, if I feel I can complement them with skills that will infuse greater value to what they're doing, then I tend to take the jump.
Okay.
Now, having said that, I could not have done any of the things I've done. I mean, I moved to China while my husband was living in India and lived there for 2.5 years. I moved to Cupertino while my mom moved from Singapore to India to help look after my children. And I traveled back and forth every 7 to 14 days.
That's unbelievable.
But I couldn't have done it if it weren't for my husband. We met at Harvard Business School, so we're both ambitious. We've both had great careers, but I couldn't have done it without both the support as well as my family's support. And I say this a lot to women. As women, you can't actually make it unless other people in your life are invested in your impact, the impact you're going to make.
Yeah. So what is it that surprised you most about working for corporates in India?
That's a great question. I think probably initially what surprised me the most was, well, let me just, because we're talking in this forum and I'm talking with you, I still don't think India is used to women leaders.
Okay.
And I think there is still this newness to it for most men and women when they're dealing with a woman leader. And so I think a lot of things come with that. And
is that regardless of how you speak, how you dress? Is it just purely on gender?
I think so. And look, I think it exists everywhere in the world, but I've lived in China, I've lived in the US. I think it's much more so in India than it is in those countries. Because when I hear other women talk about it, I see women who've done very different things from me and dress very differently from me, talk very differently from me, but still, see some very similar things. So I think knowing that and being aware of what that means was one of the most surprising things to me. And I still get surprised by it. Because you forget, right? When you're sitting in a room, you can't see yourself. So you don't notice that you're either the only woman in the room or you look particularly different from what a typical boardroom or environment would look like in India. But that's, I think, the most surprising thing.
But how do you deal with that on a day-to-day? Somebody in your position, at your level, when you're saying this, how do other women look up to you and know how to work with that on a day-to-day level in their organization?
Well, look, Aabha, two things. One, I remember when I first came to India, I would, in the first sort of 5-6 years, I would be on panels. At that time, I would be one of the younger women or the youngest woman in a group of women leaders. And sometimes I'd find that the generation above us, when they're asked, do you feel that there's a disadvantage or things are different when you're a woman? And they would say no. And I would find that really surprising because
still say it.
Often they'll be speaking to a bunch of women. And my thought process was, there's probably some young woman sitting in the audience who's thinking, oh no, then it's me. It's my capability or it's the way I am and it isn't my gender. And so I would, whenever it would come to me, the question would come to me, I'd say, look, I experience 12 small things a week.
Wow.
Because I just wanted people to be aware. And I think when the second part of your question is how do you think about it for other women? I think for me, I have gone out of my way to speak about it. I remember once being, again, I won't name the company, but being in my office, a group of people had come in. One of the people in the room was a woman. It was the business development team. The guys were all talking, and every time she would start talking, she would get interrupted. And I didn't know how to manage it without having the men turn around and say, oh, she's clearly her favorite because she's another woman. So what I did is I turned to her and I said, if you get interrupted one more time, then I suggest you leave the meeting. And the message was for everybody else in the room. And they got it, but I didn't give the message to them. I didn't say, stop interrupting her.
Right.
And she got the message. And afterwards, when the meeting ended, she came back to me later and she said, thank you for doing that. I never get to finish a sentence. And then I've been finishing every sentence since then. And so some of these things are things that I try to do. But in terms of how I deal with it, look, I think everybody is born with a set of advantages and disadvantages. And I don't think our job is to make it seem like the disadvantage doesn't exist.
Right.
Because then it doesn't help you empower other people who have the same disadvantage you do. But I think it's healthy for us to recognize that we have a lot of other advantages as well. So I kind of don't really wear it on my sleeve. I don't carry it around with me, but I'm aware of it. I deal with it. And whenever I see it, I try to acknowledge it.
When you're driving business, and we all know the kind of pressure that can come with that and in that role, how do you kind of stay true to the path? Do you have to make changes if something's not working? How do you get teams to evolve to rapidly changing decisions? And what is the definition of success to you at the end of the day?
Yeah, look, that's a great question. Let me start by saying absolutely, my first and foremost job in my role is to make sure that the business is successful. So when I have to make changes because of that, or when I have to think through what's working or not working, I take that extremely seriously.
Right.
Having said that, I don't think when any of us were born, our mothers hold us and say, one day you will sell printers and computers, I hope. I think they say, one day you will make a difference for your community or your city or your country or the world. And so everyone needs purpose. Yes. Everyone needs purpose beyond what we're doing, at least in a corporate environment.
Sure.
And so in my mind, I think my first and foremost metric for success is to drive the business and make sure that we are delivering the business, and we're delivering the business better than the expectation.
Nice.
That creates space for me and my teams to then go ahead and do other things that are valuable.
Lovely.
As well as,
Lovely.
how lucky am I? I get to work for a company that makes printers, computers, collaborative equipment, and software and services for a country that needs education, employability, skills, and is the workforce of the world today and the workforce of the world in the future.
Absolutely.
What else could you make that would be more valuable?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I just love listening to it. It's music to my ears. I think it sounds amazing. And I love what you said about creating value, because I think that's what we're all trying to do at the end of the day, with how we're creating, how we're collaborating with the ecosystem. Let's talk a little bit more about family, because you touched upon it earlier. What's your journey been like? And I don't know how much you want to share today, but I know that you have twins.
I do.
And I'm sure that's a handful. You have always spoken about how it takes an ecosystem to really come together to support women who are striving to also lead in the workplace. Has your insight into this evolved over time? We're catching up now after a while. What's it like now?
Yes, I have twin girls, and I think more importantly, I'm a product of my mother. So my father was a corporate executive. He's retired now, but he still works long days. My mother was a human rights lawyer, and I grew up with both being very different personalities, but strong personalities. And I think, I'm somewhere in between, with this desire to make a difference for the world, as well as an inclination and an understanding of how to navigate the corporate world. So and I have a younger brother. So, and both my brother and I kind of grew up in very similar circumstances, except he was very athletic and I only run when I'm chased.
Okay, that's a great visual in my head now. So I totally get it.
I said that to somebody who was telling me they were a marathon runner, and I don't think they got it. It took them a minute. Yeah, I know exactly. I feel like that family has played a very big role in who I've become and who I am and what's shaped me.
Sure.
My mom was always someone who believed in role models and talked about them, and she always said, don't worry about taking a person holistically. Find the thing that is amazing about that person and adopt that quality. And I always thought that was an amazing, and I still function like that. I still look at people and
really
say,
beautiful thing
I'd love to have
yes.
that quality, or I would love to have that. I'd love to have that hair, or I would love to have that smile, or that coolness, that ability to stay cool. But now, aside from that part of my family is my two girls. I have twin girls, in fact, and my husband. And again, this is really fun because I'm raising two girls, and it's exciting to watch them become who they are going to be. And they are chalk and cheese. They're very different from each other. So it's interesting to see their personalities develop. But we very much support each other. So the girls and I call ourselves the Three Musketeers.
What fun.
So when I am having a really intense time at work, I say, look, I need your help because I need to get this right. And we sort of split responsibilities. So I'll tell them, you need to do your own homework. You need to look after your own school stuff. Mama's going to go work really hard, and we're going to, come back in the evening or catch up on the weekend and make sure that we've all done everything we were supposed to do. So
does it work?
Yeah, it does. I'm very close to them, and we've always kind of been like that.
That's adorable.
Yeah. So, and then my husband's also been this. We were in business school together, so we've kind of been partners since the beginning. And I think there were times when I felt like, you said I've moved, right? I moved to China right before I had kids, and I remember saying to my husband, they're asking me to move to China to be the chief commercial officer of China as well. What do I do? We're deciding to try to start a family, etc. And he said, if we were meant to start a family, it would have happened. You got the call to go to China first. Go to China. We'll figure it out. And we did, which
that's fabulous.
Yeah.
How do you, as a woman leader, create a safe, inclusive environment, or supportive and inclusive environment for your ecosystem here as well at HP or in any of the organizations you work with? Yeah,
look, I am pretty maniacal about the importance of it, and I think the starting place is language.
Okay.
A lot of times people make silly jokes or statements and they don't realize that it actually makes impact. I remember sitting in a meeting one day where somebody used the example of talking about a channel partner, and they said it's like getting a new girlfriend. And I just found it completely inappropriate, because people don't realize that once you start using language in a certain way, you actually impact the way everybody around the table thinks. I remember sitting in a leadership meeting where we were looking at talent, and we went through a number of men. They were great. A woman came up and somebody said, "Did you know that her husband lives in another country?" And after that, every time a man came up, I said, "Where does his wife live?"
Wow.
Because it wasn't
I'm
even
so
something
glad you did
anybody had
that.
talked
Yeah.
about. And I do it lightly because
Yeah.
I don't create
But
heavy
it's
moments
calling
all
it
the
out.
time.
Yeah.
But it gets called out, right? And you end up having the
It's so
conversation.
important. I have been privy to this as well in certain circles. And sometimes you don't know how to address it or what to do, because it's just so ingrained and so prevalent. And if there are 8 men in the room and it's just 1 or 2 women, to be able to know what to say at that time. And someone, let's say, in a leadership position like yourself, who perhaps has both the position as well as the skills to address it, could do it. But a lot of other women may not be able to.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's it's funny. I was hearing the story earlier today about how a young saleswoman was saying to somebody else, to one of my other colleagues, that when she first joined the company, she would be asked to. Her whole team was men, and her boss turned to her and said, "Here's a group of women you can sit with and have lunch."
no.
And she said, "Why would I do that?" But what really heartened me was the colleague I was talking to said to me, this young lady also said, since our MD became a woman, and since Ipsita has been in the role, this has changed. People are saying these things much less, and people are more
That's
integrated.
so heartening.
So
That's
I think
heartening.
representation also matters,
100%.
right? And I have a great leadership team, and most of them are men, and they're great guys. But I think everybody has had to learn to adjust, to think through what that means, and to understand what that looks like.
Let's talk about technology for a moment, because we would like to see more women representation in the world of tech and in large tech organizations as well. Do you see that changing? Do you feel there are structural shifts taking place? You talked a lot about skilling, employability. Are there specific measures or policies that are being implemented in order to encourage more women also to enter the tech ecosystem?
Look, I think one really, there are 3 things that at least I've been working on to think about. One of them is that if you think about the most productive device to work on, it's the PC.
Okay.
A phone or a tablet, if you try to write out if you wrote this in the form of an article or you come up with the questions, you'll find it much harder to do something truly creative or intense or complex unless you're actually sitting in front of a PC. It's harder to do it on a phone or on a tablet. Those are largely consumption devices.
Right.
So I feel very strongly that women need access to PCs. And often, if a woman is at home and working from home, especially if she's in the gig economy or a freelancer, I see sometimes that they're working with phones.
Okay.
And that is a disadvantage.
Right.
Maybe when their spouses come home and they're sitting down at the PC, then they get access. But I think that is one thing that can make a big difference.
Okay.
The second one is, this idea of AI on devices allows for, we still have the lowest workforce participation of women across almost any country in the world. I think only Afghanistan is lower than us at this point in time.
Sadly.
Most countries are ahead of us. Almost all countries are ahead of us. If the reason is partly because it's difficult for a woman with so many stakeholders to get out of the house, the idea that you can just imagine if AI can do a bunch of your mundane tasks for you, you can use agentic AI to get things done, to reach consumers or to do financial analysis. Suddenly a woman has an ally. True. And to me, I like thinking about that. And we've been doing a lot of work with rural women on the ways in which they can learn things like dressmaking, panchayat sort of activities while using a PC. So in my mind, the ability to do those things will be really helpful to women because it will allow them to at least start to generate an income from home. And if you start to generate an income from home, and I always say this to women, if the family or household gets used to your income, they make it easier for you to do to continue to have a career.
Absolutely.
I always tell women, if you want to be taken seriously and you want people invested, make sure that whatever you do for a living contributes to your home in a significant manner. When I feel like my whole family is on top of me, I just turn around and say, look, if I don't get this done, I'm going to lose my job, and the house becomes completely quiet. Because nobody wants that to happen either.
Good
exactly.
Strategy, yeah.
So I'd say those are kind of the ways to think about how technology can make a difference. And the other way is, look, skilling and upskilling is going to be something that we're going to have to do very quickly. And more with small, medium, and large language models coming onto devices, we are actually going to be able to provide people with the opportunity to skill themselves more quickly.
These are great insights. Thank you for sharing. When we talk about mentorship and sponsorship as well, and that's, I mean, they're often talked about in the context of growing in the corporate world. How important do you find mentorship and sponsorship to building up women in the workforce, especially in these tech organizations? Do you feel it is important? Do you feel it needs to be enforced? Do you see it working at a practical level?
You know, I am not a big believer in mentors. Because in my mind, mentors...
That's unusual.
Well, I'll tell you what I mean by that.
Yes.
I'm a big believer in advocates and allies versus mentors.
Would that be the same as a sponsor?
Yes.
Yes.
A sponsor is like an advocate.
Sure.
And I'll tell you what I mean by the difference, by what I mean that's different. Mentors to me are people who give you advice.
Yeah.
Tell you what they've done, do kind of what I'm doing right now. Advocates or sponsors are people, when you're not in the room, who put your name forward.
Got it.
Who speak up for you, who make sure that you are known for what you can do. And I find the biggest difference between an advocate or a sponsor and a mentor is that usually you will have done something or delivered for an advocate or a sponsor because they know you deeply, right? And so I always tell people, like, many people will come up to me and say, will you be my mentor? And I say, look, it's not very useful for me to be your mentor. I mentor a lot of people. I'm an advocate for a lot of people, but those people are people I know.
Right.
So their names are in my head and they come up at the right moments in the right ways. But if it's somebody I don't know at all and I'm just getting to know them and spending 30 minutes a quarter with them, it's not useful to them. I feel like the best way to utilize this idea of mentorship is to find allies and advocates and sponsors.
And I think that's what we're doing at Ladies Who Lead as well, in terms of building an ecosystem that has actually built that trust with one another, can refer one another. And we see that happening. And I think it's so powerful when it does. I'm sure that women participation has increased under your tenure. How many women, however, do you see actually make it to those senior roles, whether it's because of being able to walk the path, whether it be because of personal choices? Do you see that process breaking down in the middle, or have you been able to at least see a shift through some of the work that you've been doing to enable them?
I definitely see a shift. And, in my own company, my CFO now is a woman, and she just became the CFO a couple of months ago. But at the same time, and also, Aabha, for the last 10, 11 years, I've been getting these Most Powerful Women in Business Awards or Most Powerful Women in India Awards. And I still remember when those awards were 25 women. And today those awards are 100 women or 45 women or 50 women. And there are still so many when I look at the list.
See the list, yes.
And I look at the list and there are so many women that are not on it. So clearly the shift is there. But it's still, we still have a women's list, which is indicative of something, right? That it's just, we are nowhere near 50% of the population. And if we're not 50% of the population, we are not adequately represented. I tell you that I find this a little bit frustrating in India because I sometimes feel women make choices that work against themselves. And I say this a lot. I've had women who I have thought were stars, invested a lot in, who have come into my office and said, I'm getting married, so I'm going to stop working. And I'll say, why are you going to stop working? Oh, I'm going to focus on my marriage. So your husband also doesn't work? No, he works. So what are you going to do during the day? How are you going to focus on your marriage if he's in the office? And just, that whole conversation, or you see women who are really well educated and they decide that they're not going to work. And I always say, even if you're going to do nonprofit work, give back that chair, that seat you took in a university.
Yes.
Because those seats are valuable and lots of people are trying to get them. So if we are not in the rooms that decisions are being made in, then decisions are not going to be made that are good for us. And that is not going to change. People are not suddenly going to start thinking about us unless we're in the rooms thinking.
I completely agree with you. But don't you get pushback? Don't you get women asking you, that it's a real life choice and they shouldn't be judged for it? I mean, equally, they may not understand the need to kind of have that drive or purpose or ambition, and everyone doesn't have that ambition, which is fair. But do you get pushback?
I do. I also feel I don't get so much pushback. I think people sometimes see you have to. My days are never easy, and I am going back and forth between 100 things. But I do feel like a lot of times people will ask me, what's your me time? My me time is my time with my kids. Yes. My me time is my work. My me time is my time with our communities. My me time is time with my family and my parents. So because everything is me time to me, I don't miss the spas or the salons or whatever it is that people consider me time. So I think you've got to, as a woman, you will have more responsibilities because of the way we all are. Yeah. My 11-year-old girls need their mom differently than they need their dad, even though their father is a very hands-on father.
Sure.
You have to be willing personally to engage and have a lot more energy to do all of it. And I do recognize that to be true, but I think people don't realize that you don't have to be perfect at all of it. And
that's a gem. I think that's a gem, because I think that's what's intimidating.
Yeah.
That perhaps we need to be the super achiever. We need to somehow be a pro. We need to know it all. Maybe that's the image that they feel. If you are going to take that path, you have to be this perfect leader, perfect boss, perfect all-rounder.
And it's not all on the women. I still remember when I was a few companies ago, a woman, I was holding roundtables with young women in the organization to ask them what it's like and, what they're experiencing. And one woman said, you can never win. I just had a baby recently. If I stay in the office late, the guys say, what a horrible mother. If I go home early, they say, oh, she gets to go because she's a woman. And so there is no winning. Whichever one, you can't adjust to. And so to some extent, you have to say, you know what? I know who I am. I'm comfortable with who I am. I'm going to deliver. And I tell women 3 things. Deliver what you say you're going to deliver, first and foremost. Be nice to people because we need community more than anyone else.
True.
I want my neighbors to like me because if I am traveling and I'm somewhere far away and one of my kids needs help, I need to be able to call someone.
Sure.
That person has to think I'm not a jerk. Men have the luxury of being perceived as jerks. Women do not. So be nice to people. And the third thing I say is take risk. And if you do the first 2 well, if you deliver on what you say you're going to do, and if you're nice to people, when you take risks and you fail, people help you. It's a given. So I do this thing now on weekends. I spend an hour and a half with kids around my kids' age who are in my building and some of the kids from school. And we go do different things. We meet speakers. We experience something. We look at the world of cricket. We look at the world of... And I just did it because I enjoy it. And I enjoy being around these 10 to 13-year-olds. And I was so touched by a couple of the mothers reaching out to me to say, do you need something? I know you're not going to be here. Can I send something to the house? Because before that, they had seen this woman who leaves in the morning and comes back in the evening.
Right.
And now their kids come home. And sometimes I get texts from moms saying, the speaker you invited told my son that he'd be really good at this. And he's so excited. And so you have to be human and you have to be part of a community as well. So I find sometimes women, either they opt not to get into that public career
Yeah.
or that career. And then sometimes I find when they do, they remove themselves from society to be able to address this part. But the reality is you're
You'll
going to
have
have
to
to
do
live
both.
with all of it.
So quickly, just to touch upon AI, but how is that creating, let's say, a new landscape for leaders, whether it's in terms of how you view leadership itself, whether it's in terms of systems and processes, whether it's in terms of inclusive growth? I mean, there could be a myriad of ways that AI could affect us all. How is it going to be touching your life, your organization? How are you perceiving it as a leader?
Look, I think one of the great things about India is that where many parts of the world are thinking of AI as something that's going to replace them, young people in India, in survey after survey, have said they think AI is going to serve them, which I think is a very optimistic, nice way to think about AI. India has always adapted technology to what they need it to be and they want it to be. We've seen it with phones, we've seen it with digital payments, we've seen it in multiple ways. In my mind, there are three things we need to think about. We should use it and experiment with it so we understand what it can mean for us and what it can do. So I have really started to push myself to use AI more and more to understand what is AI. The second thing is we should be careful how much we use it, because we shouldn't stop doing our own thinking and doing our own coming up with stuff. You know this, Aabha. The hardest thing to do is starting from a blank piece of paper. But we need to keep starting from that blank piece of paper because we can't all become editors.
True.
And you know, how many things do you get nowadays where you're like, that wasn't written by somebody because it makes no sense. This is a ChatGPT letter.
I think I've started talking like ChatGPT now. I'm like...
So, but I still find my most authentic work is when I'm writing it, and I still tend to start there.
It's like you said, it's a human touch, and I think that's really visible. I think everyone now has got the AI language. It's you know, you can hear it when people are speaking or using it, but a human touch or something authentic comes through differently.
Exactly.
Today, a lot of young leaders are also looking to have greater influence, have a greater voice. So how would you distinguish between influence and authority? And for an emerging leader today, how can they grow to have more of an influence?
Yeah, look, I think influence is actually the only real kind of leadership. Authority works only to a certain extent, but beyond that, if you are not perceived to be driving something that makes sense or directionally makes sense, you will not have people follow along. And so I think influence is in reality what leadership really looks like and is. And more, if you look at companies, you know, you asked Aabha earlier, what's the difference in these big complex companies? Well, they're all matrixed. You can't do anything on your own. You have to influence, and you have to make sure a lot of people come along with you on things that you want to do. And in many ways, I believe in that model, because what it allows you to do is get a lot of thinking in, as long as people are not just blocking for the sake of blocking. You get a lot of different points of view, and you can hone in on doing things better. But I think fundamentally, you have to understand, if you're going to be a leader, what it takes to have somebody follow a vision or participate as leaders themselves, and what does it take for someone to step up. And to me, in my mind, that has always been shaping purpose. I just believe when people wake up in the morning and leave their loved ones and leave time away from doing other things for themselves or their families, they need to believe they're making an impact. So my way of driving it has been to drive that impact. I always say, you know, I have 24,000 people in India, in HP India. We're all Indians. We're not a multinational. We're an Indian company right alongside India, working on things that are important to India. And I actually believe that motivates a lot of the people in the organization.
Fantastic. Ipsita, it was so good catching up with you. I remember now why we've always had a wonderful time exchanging notes, and you're truly an inspiration. And I think it was wonderful to have you share some of those insights with us, our followers, our members, especially during Women's Day and, you know, this entire month. So thank you so much for joining us.
But thank you, Aabha. It was a pleasure to be here, and right back at you on the fact that you're also an inspiration.
So we wish you all the best, and we'll be rooting for you.
Thank you so much.